The Grey City and the Opera Theatre. In the heart of a vast land, nestled between mountains shrouded in mist and forests ancient as time itself, stood the Grey City, an architectural masterpiece that was more a work of art than a mere collection of buildings. Every structure in the Grey City was unique, sculpted from stone, glass, and enchanted metals, painted with swirling murals that seemed to come alive under the moonlight. The streets were wide and welcoming, lined with statues of long-forgotten heroes, grand fountains, and lush gardens that whispered with the voices of ancient spirits. The air hummed with an energy that could only be described as magic, an invisible web that connected every brick, every tile, and every stone in the city. At the heart of this magical metropolis was the central square, an expanse of smooth, glistening cobblestone that stretched like a sea of grey and silver, with veins of gold running through it like rivers of light. The square was vast, larger than a dozen football fields, and always bustling with life, merchants selling wares from far-flung kingdoms, musicians playing strange, otherworldly instruments, and street magicians performing tricks that defied the laws of nature. But amidst all the commotion, there was one building that drew every eye, one structure that dominated the skyline and stood as a testament to the city's greatness, the Opera House of the Grey City. It was an edifice of such grandeur and magnificence that visitors often stood before it, dumbfounded, trying to comprehend its beauty. The Opera House towered above the square, its walls made of polished marble that shimmered in the sun and glowed with an ethereal light under the stars. Columns, taller than trees, rose toward the sky, carved with intricate scenes of history and legend, while domes of crystal and gold sparkled like the heavens themselves. But what set the Opera House apart was not just its size or its splendor, it was the magic that lived within its walls. The Opera House was alive with enchantment. It was said that the building had a will of its own, a consciousness that could shift and reshape its halls depending on the needs of its guests. Inside, the rooms were endless, always changing, a labyrinth of hidden corridors, forgotten stages, and secret chambers. The chandeliers, hanging from ceilings that seemed to stretch into infinity, were lit by flames that flickered in every color imaginable. Tapestries of scenes from forgotten eras draped the walls, their images moving as if the stories were unfolding before your eyes. The Opera House was a gathering place for magicians, sorceresses, and wizards from across the world. On any given night, one could find the most skilled practitioners of magic performing rituals in the grand atrium, enchanting the very air with their spells. Illusionists wove entire worlds from nothingness on the grand stage, while necromancers communed with the spirits that dwelled in the hidden chambers below the Opera House. For it was well known that the building was haunted, not in a fearful way, but in a manner that spoke to the deep connection between the Grey City and the arcane. Ghosts roamed the halls, translucent figures in ancient garb who whispered in forgotten tongues. Some were the spirits of great musicians and performers, forever tied to the stage where they had given the performance of a lifetime. Others were magicians who had passed on, their souls lingering in the city they loved. These spirits were not malevolent, though, they were part of the fabric of the city, an extension of the magic that filled every corner of the Opera House. Occasionally, visitors would hear their voices singing along with the performers, adding a spectral harmony to the opera that left audiences awestruck. The most famous of these spirits was Amara, the Lady of the Song. She had been the star of the Opera House centuries ago, a singer of such talent that it was said her voice could make the very stars weep. Amara had died on stage, mid-performance, her heart giving out as she sang the final, tragic note of a love ballad. But even in death, she had not left the stage. Her voice could still be heard, faintly, during the quiet moments before the curtains rose, a soft, mournful melody that echoed through the vast auditorium. But the opera house was more than a haunted concert hall. It was a place of deep, ancient magic, a nexus of power where the boundary between the physical world and the realm of the arcane was thin. Many believed that the opera house itself was a living entity, a creature born of magic and stone, its heart beating with the pulse of the Grey City's magic. This was why the most powerful sorcerers and wizards flocked to it, seeking the mysteries hidden within its ever-shifting walls. There were stories of entire secret societies that met in the depths of the opera house, practicing forbidden magics and unlocking the secrets of the universe. Not all who entered the opera house did so for performance or study, however. There were whispers of a secret vault hidden deep beneath the stage, a chamber said to hold relics of unimaginable power, artifacts that had been locked away for fear that their magic would corrupt or destroy the world. Only a handful of people knew the true location of this vault, and fewer still dared to seek it. It was said that the vault was protected by powerful wards and guardians, spirits more ancient and dangerous than any in the city. And yet, from time to time, rumors would surface of a brave, or foolish, adventurer who had ventured into the depths of the opera house, never to return. Beyond the opera house, the Grey City itself thrummed with magic. Every building in the city was a masterpiece, from the museums that housed enchanted paintings and statues that moved on their own, to the restaurants where the food was cooked by fire elementals summoned by the chefs, to the libraries where the books were alive, telling their stories aloud to those who wandered among the shelves. The streets themselves seemed to shift at times, rearranging themselves in subtle ways, as if the city was guiding its residents to where they needed to be. The city's central library, a towering structure of glass and iron, was another place of wonder. Inside, books floated in midair, pages turning on their own as scholars and mags consulted them. The library was said to contain every spell ever written, every magical treatise ever scribed, and knowledge from other worlds. Scholars came from across the land to study there, hoping to uncover the secrets of the arcane. Some stayed for years, never finding the answers they sought, but others left with a deeper understanding of the magical world. But it was the opera house that remained the crown jewel of the Grey City, a place where art, magic, and mystery intertwined in ways that could not be unraveled. The city's inhabitants, humans, elves, and beings of other, stranger origins, lived in harmony with the magic that permeated their lives. Visitors who came to the Grey City often found themselves lost in the wonder of it all, unable to leave, enchanted by the beauty and power that surrounded them. And so the Grey City stood, a beacon of magic and art, a place where the mundane and the extraordinary blended together in perfect harmony, and where the opera house reigned as the heart of it all, a place of ghosts, enchantments, and eternal mystery, forever drawing those who sought to understand the magic that flowed through the veins of the world. The opera. The Grey City was never silent for long. Magic coursed through its veins, manifesting in the endless hum of enchantments that filled its streets, and nowhere was this energy more potent than in the Grand Opera House. The towering edifice stood as the city's heart, an epicenter of magic and art, and every year it hosted an event that transcended mere performance, a spectacle known far and wide as the Ball of the 100 Kings. The event was an unparalleled celebration of magic, art, and adventure, where sorcerers, magicians, and explorers from distant lands came to witness, and perhaps partake in, the most extraordinary gathering of magical minds and spirits. On the night of the ball, the streets of the Grey City were more alive than ever, illuminated by the warm glow of floating lanterns and shimmering enchantments that danced through the air. The wide avenues leading to the opera house were filled with people, travelers, adventurers, wizards, and scholars alike, each hoping to secure a seat in the grand hall for the event. The opera house, bathed in the soft glow of moonlight, loomed in the distance, its marble walls seeming to pulse with a faint, otherworldly light. The massive crimson banners that draped the building swayed gently in the evening breeze, embroidered with gold sigils that shimmered like stars. The main opera hall of the building was a world unto itself. Stepping inside felt like entering a realm where time and space folded in upon themselves. It was as though the very air within was thick with history, magic, and the presence of countless spirits. The hall was cavernous, yet every detail was rich and meticulously crafted, exuding an overwhelming sense of grandeur. It could seat 10,000 spectators, and on the night of the ball, every seat would be filled. The first thing one noticed upon entering the hall was the crimson and gold color scheme that dominated the space, evoking a sense of royal elegance. The walls were draped with heavy crimson curtains, their fabric shimmering like flowing liquid beneath the flickering light of enchanted candles. The carpet, a rich crimson shade that seemed to glow with an inner warmth, stretched from the massive, gilded doors at the entrance all the way to the stage. The chairs, with plush upholstery of the same regal crimson, were arranged in perfect symmetry, each one crowned with gold filigree that caught the light. The golden boxes and balconies that lined the upper levels gleamed like treasure, their railings etched with ancient runes and intricate designs of flora and fauna. The floor of the hall was a study in contrast. The dark wood of the audience's seating area was polished to a mirror-like sheen, grounding the whole with a deep, almost mystical weight. In contrast, the stage itself was constructed of lighter wood, glowing softly under the stage lights as if imbued with its own magic. It was said that the stage, much like the opera house itself, could change shape and form to suit the needs of the performers, expanding into new realms or conjuring landscapes from otherworldly dimensions. Above it all, suspended like a jewel from the heavens, hung the crystal chandelier, the most breathtaking in all the known worlds. It was enormous, its arms reaching out like delicate branches, each one laden with crystals of every shape and size. The light that emanated from the chandelier was not static, but alive, shifting and morphing like the flickering of stars in the night sky. The crystals caught the light and refracted it, casting rainbows across the hall, filling the space with a soft, enchanting glow. But the chandelier was more than just a decoration, it was said to be infused with ancient magic, and during the Ball of the 100 Kings, it would come to life, its crystals ringing out like a symphony of bells, resonating with the spells woven by the performers on stage. Along the walls, lamps in the shape of candelabras glowed with flames that burned not with ordinary fire, but with living flames, small, sentient beings of fire that danced and flickered, casting a warm, golden light. These flames whispered softly, telling tales of forgotten realms to those who listened closely, their voices rising and falling like the wind. The lamps, crafted from wrought iron and gold, resembled twisting vines, with the living flames nestled gently in their branches. The ceiling of the opera hall was a masterpiece in itself, painted to resemble the open sky on a perfect summer day. Moving clouds drifted lazily across the painted blue expanse, their shadows shifting subtly across the floor below. But the true marvel of the ceiling was the presence of mythical, winged creatures, griffins, dragons, phoenixes, and other creatures of legend, that soared above the audience, their wings flapping softly, their eyes twinkling with hidden wisdom. These creatures were not mere paintings but living, magical beings, woven into the fabric of the ceiling's enchantment, forever flying in the painted sky, watching over the events that took place below. As the night of the Ball of the 100 Kings began, the hall was filled to capacity. The audience was a dazzling array of magical talent, mags in flowing robes of silk, alchemists adorned in cloaks that shimmered with arcane symbols, and adventurers with weapons that gleamed with runes. The air crackled with anticipation. The ball was not merely a performance, It was an event that blurred the lines between reality and myth, art and magic. The performance began with a single note, a sound so pure and resonant that it seemed to echo through every corner of the hall. From that note, the music swelled, filling the space with a melody that could only be described as otherworldly. As the curtains rose, revealing the enchanted stage, the first of the 100 kings appeared. These were not mortal kings, but spectral figures from distant realms and forgotten epochs, each one a master of magic in their own right. Clad in robes of gold and crimson, their crowns gleaming like stars, they moved gracefully across the stage, their presence commanding and awe-inspiring. The kings did not merely perform, they wove magic into their dance, into their voices, into the very fabric of the opera house. Each king represented a different aspect of magic: fire, water, earth, air, and more esoteric forces like time, dreams, and even the void. As they performed, the stage transformed into a series of breathtaking landscapes, a forest of silver trees, a desert of glowing sands, a sea of stars. The audience watched, spellbound, as the kings conjured creatures of legend, battles between ancient foes, and entire worlds born from the pure essence of magic. But the true wonder of the ball came after the performance, when the magic unleashed by the kings began to spill beyond the stage, mingling with the energies of the opera house itself. The chandelier above began to chime, its crystal notes harmonizing with the magic in the air. The mythical creatures painted on the ceiling descended into the hall, flying low over the audience, inviting them into the performance. The walls shifted, revealing hidden doors that led to secret chambers, and the audience found themselves drawn into an adventure that extended far beyond the confines of the opera hall. For those lucky enough to secure a place in the hall, the Ball of the 100 Kings was not just a performance, it was the beginning of a journey into the unknown, a night where magic, art, and reality merged into one, and where the boundaries between dream and waking dissolved into the ether. And for the rest of the year, the stories of that night would be told in hushed voices, as travelers and adventurers carried the legend of the Grey City and its enchanted opera house to the farthest reaches of the world. Ghosts of the Opera. The Grey City's opera house was a place where magic was not merely woven into the performances, but into the very structure of the building itself. On the surface, it was already an unparalleled marvel, a jewel of architecture, art, and enchantment. But the more one explored, the more one realized that this grand, majestic theater was a living, breathing entity, a place full of secrets, metamorphoses, and phantoms that danced in the twilight between reality and illusion. One of the first things any visitor would notice upon entering the opera house was the way it changed with the phases of the moon. The color of the opera's curtains, upholstery, and carpets was in constant flux, shifting in tune with lunar cycles. On nights of the full moon, the color was an intense crimson, a hue that seemed to pulse with energy. This phase aligned the opera house with the power of blood magic, life forces, and transformation. On such nights, spells of healing, regeneration, and transformation were particularly potent, and the opera hall would thrum with a heady, raw energy. As the moon waned, the color would shift to a deep blue, invoking the mysteries of the mind and the realm of dreams. Sorcerers who specialized in illusions, mentalism, or prophetic visions would often gather here, drawing upon the hall's subtle yet profound magic. With the new moon, the green phase would come, tied to earth magic, growth, and nature's more secretive, occult forces. Lastly, as the moon waxed toward fullness again, the opera hall would turn violet, a color resonating with spells of summoning, necromancy, and the manipulation of time and space. Each phase brought with it a shift in the magical ambience, making the opera house a sanctuary for different types of spells, depending on the time of the month. Beneath the rose of crimson, blue, green, or violet upholstered seats, hidden within the very floorboards, were small hiding places known only to the most cunning adventurers or wizards. It was whispered that under certain seats lay tiny, hidden compartments, cleverly concealed caches where powerful artifacts had been left by past visitors, long-forgotten spell components, or even relics from previous eras of the opera's storied history. Some of these were mundane, coins from forgotten kingdoms or dusty scrolls, but others held more significant power, such as enchanted rings that whispered secrets or tiny enchanted crystals that held the memories of bygone sorcerers. Behind the grand, flowing curtains that draped the stage lay not merely the backstage, but an entire hidden world. Secret rooms and halls could be found if one was bold or fortunate enough to stumble upon the right folds in the fabric. These chambers, draped in shadow and veiled in ancient magic, were said to house everything from forgotten libraries of spellbooks to hidden altars used by dark cults. There were stories of magicians who had entered one such secret room and emerged days, weeks, or even years later, carrying with them knowledge that should not have been possible to obtain. As one wandered through the opera house, it was impossible to ignore the ghosts. The smallest and most harmless of these were the spirits of the candelabra, tiny, mischievous beings that lived within the enchanted candle lamps scattered throughout the hall. These spirits danced within the flames, their laughter a soft crackling sound. They tended to the lights, ensuring that the living fire burned just as brightly, and sometimes flickered out only to reappear elsewhere, as if playing a game with the visitors. While playful, they were also ancient protectors of the opera's deeper magic. But the spirits of the candelabra were far from the only supernatural inhabitants. The larger, more dangerous phantoms roamed the corridors freely. Succubi, winged demonesses with pale skin and haunting, glowing eyes, had made nests within the forgotten upper reaches of the opera house. Their presence was both alluring and terrifying, as they whispered temptations to those brave or foolish enough to seek them out. While they seldom ventured into the main hall, their presence could be felt during the violet phase of the moon, when necromantic energies were strongest. Roaming the dark corridors and hidden chambers were also aristocratic vampires, their long cloaks trailing behind them as they drifted through the hallways with a languid grace. These vampires were not like their lesser kin, they were ancient and elegant, as much a part of the opera's mystique as the magic that flowed through its stones. They would often be seen during the Ball of the 100 Kings, mingling with the wizards and adventurers, sipping wine, or blood, from crystal goblets, and offering cryptic words of wisdom. Perhaps most unsettling of all were the phantom armors, empty suits of armor, some of which seemed to hover in midair, others that simply wandered the opera house like lost sentinels. They were relics of wars long forgotten, bound by enchantments that had survived the ages. Their purpose was unclear, but they often appeared during moments of great magical upheaval, as if drawn to the energy of the place. Among the various phantoms and supernatural beings, there were those who held true dominion over the opera house, the Lilum women. These sorceresses were the permanent inhabitants of the opera, feared and revered in equal measure. Dressed in long, flowing gowns that brushed the ground, their faces were always half hidden by deep hoods, leaving only their glowing eyes visible. Each Lilum carried a huge tome, grimoires of immense magical power, written in forgotten languages and filled with spells that could rewrite reality. Despite the massive size of these books, the Lilum moved gracefully, as if unburdened by their weight. The Lilum were powerful beyond measure, their magic ancient and dangerous. They were the true keepers of the opera house's secrets, and those who dared to cross them rarely survived unscathed. It was said that the Lilum could manipulate time and space within the opera, twisting the very walls and floors to their will. They were often seen in the moments before the Ball of the 100 Kings, preparing the hall for the grand event, ensuring that every spell and enchantment was perfectly aligned for the coming magic. But the greatest secret of the opera house was hidden behind the stage, a secret known only to the bravest or most foolhardy adventurers. Once a year, during the Ball of the 100 Kings, a hidden passageway would appear behind the stage's massive crimson curtain. This passage led to the Endless Opera, a place that defied all logic and reason. The Endless Opera was a spatial loop, an eternal chain of opera halls, each one unique yet somehow connected to the last. The first hall might be blue, with silver accents, while the next was violet with black crystal chandeliers, and the one after that a deep green with walls that seemed to breathe. As one ventured further into the Endless Opera, the halls grew stranger, more surreal, some filled with floating islands of seats, others with stages suspended in midair, defying gravity and sense. This endless sequence of halls was said to represent the infinite nature of magic itself, a twisting, spiraling Ouroboros that could never be fully understood or contained. Each hall held its own mysteries, its own phantoms, and its own enchantments, growing more dangerous the deeper one ventured. Some halls were filled with treasure, artifacts of incredible power, while others were haunted by spirits that defied description. The true nature of the Endless Opera remained one of the opera house's most closely guarded secrets. Only a few had ever ventured beyond the first few halls, and fewer still had returned. But those who did speak of it told of worlds within worlds, of doors that led to other dimensions, and of spells so powerful that they could reshape reality itself. To enter the Endless Opera was to embark on a journey with no clear destination, to surrender oneself to the unknowable. And for those who braved its mysteries, the rewards, or the consequences, were beyond imagining. The White Queen and the Black Queen. In the heart of the Grey City, where art and magic intertwined, where phantoms roamed freely and the streets pulsed with unseen energy, there existed a ruler unlike any other, a figure of immense power and timeless beauty known as the White Queen. She was the sovereign of both the opera house and the ethereal realms that lay just beyond mortal perception. Hers was a reign of majesty and fire, a queen born not of flesh and blood, but of magic itself. The White Queen appeared as a woman of striking elegance, her form wrapped in a flowing, snow-white dress adorned with countless diamonds. Each gem sparkled with a light of its own, refracting magic into the air around her, creating an aura that seemed to ripple like fire. Her gown shimmered like frost in the morning sun, yet around her was a halo of living flame. This fiery halo constantly shifted and morphed, a corona of pure energy that hovered above her head or cascaded down like a waterfall of flame, blazing brightly during moments of high emotion or power. At official receptions, she wore her high golden crown, its edges jagged like tongues of flame frozen in gold. The crown was ancient, a relic from an age before the Grey City was even built, and it marked her as not just a ruler of mortals, but a sovereign of all the phantoms and spirits that called the opera house their home. Despite her youthfulness, her appearance forever frozen in a state of radiant beauty, the White Queen was one of the elder phantoms, her essence tied not to life or death, but to the elemental forces of magic. When her temper flared, or when she performed on the grand stage, her form would grow, expanding to an awe-inspiring height of 4 or even 6 meters. In these moments, she became a towering avatar of power, her dress billowing like a storm cloud, her flames reaching toward the vaulted ceilings of the opera house. But after such performances, she would return to her usual, more human-sized form, her presence no less commanding but more contained. The White Queen ruled with grace over all the light spirits of the Grey City and the opera house. Her dominion stretched to the highest floors, where the walls of the opera glowed with a soft, radiant light, and where the spirits of the air, beings of purity and light, drifted like whispers in the wind. Even angels were said to heed her call, their wings brushing the rafters of the opera's upper levels, silently watching the magical performances below. Beneath her rule, these light spirits maintained the balance of magic, ensuring that the energy flowing through the opera house remained harmonious, even in the face of the dark forces that lurked below. For while the White Queen reigned supreme over the light, her power was not without challenge. The Black Queen, her elder sister, ruled the shadows and the dark creatures that slithered through the hidden levels beneath the opera. The Black Queen was a figure shrouded in mystery, rarely seen, but her influence was undeniable. She commanded the demons, vampires, and shadow spirits, creatures that lived in the dark, feeding off the fear and desire of those who dared venture into her domain. While the White Queen was often seen presiding over the grand halls, performing magnificent magical feats, or mingling with the great sorcerers of the Grey City, the Black Queen rarely revealed herself in public. She was elusive, secretive, and patient, always plotting in the deep, hidden levels of the opera house. Her throne room, carved from obsidian and draped in shadows, was said to exist far below the stage, in a labyrinth of tunnels that connected to the underground levels. Only the most daring, or foolish, adventurers had ever ventured there, and none spoke of what they found in her domain without a tremble of fear. Her throne, they whispered, was not just a seat of power but a living entity, pulsating with dark energy, and her rule over the shadow spirits was absolute. There were constant debates, often held in hushed tones, about which sister was the more powerful. The White Queen, radiant and commanding, had the loyalty of the opera's more benevolent spirits, and she controlled the light, an ancient and pure force. But the Black Queen, with her legions of shadow creatures and vampires, held sway over the dark forces that could corrupt even the brightest of magics. Some believed that the balance of power between them was delicate, like the waxing and waning of the moon that changed the opera's colors. Others whispered that one day, there would be a reckoning between the two, a final confrontation that would decide the fate of the Grey City itself. But until that day came, both sisters remained in their respective domains, the White Queen ruling the upper floors and the Black Queen holding court in the shadows below, each maintaining an uneasy truce. The Grey City itself reflected this duality, often shrouded in heavy rain, a frequent companion to the city's dark, winding streets. The rain, however, was not merely a natural phenomenon, it held magical properties. The storms that swept through the city brought with them a renewal of magical energy, amplifying the power of sorcerers and enchanters. The slush-covered squares glistened with an eerie light, as if the very puddles were infused with magic, and it was said that spells cast during these rains were far more potent. Wizards would stand in the streets, arms raised, drawing the rain's magic into themselves, and alchemists would gather the enchanted water to use in their experiments. Even the lanterns that lit the city at night glowed brighter during these storms, their light refracted through the raindrops like tiny prisms, casting rainbow shadows along the cobbled streets. And still, the opera house held more secrets than any knew, its halls and corridors ever shifting. 3 such mysteries stood out above the rest, each known only to the bravest or most foolhardy explorers. The first secret was the mirror chamber, a hidden room that could only be accessed by speaking a forgotten incantation into one of the mirrors found backstage. This chamber was a place where reflections took on a life of their own, stepping out of the mirrors to interact with the visitor. It was said that in this room, one could speak with reflections of the past, alternate versions of oneself, or even long-dead spirits trapped within the mirror's glass. The second secret lay in the Veil of Whispers, a spectral curtain that appeared in different parts of the opera house, seemingly at random. Those who passed through the veil would hear the voices of long-forgotten performers, magicians, and phantoms who once called the opera home. The whispers were not always coherent, but they often contained clues to hidden treasures or forgotten spells, and some even said that the veil could transport those who passed through it to different times or dimensions within the opera. The final and most dangerous secret was the Crimson Staircase, a set of blood-red steps that appeared only during the violet phase of the moon. The staircase led down into the depths of the Black Queen's domain, deeper than even her throne room. Those who descended the Crimson Staircase never returned unchanged. Some came back with newfound powers, others with their minds shattered. It was rumored that at the bottom of the staircase lay a portal to a place beyond even the endless opera, a realm of pure darkness and shadow where the true nature of the Black Queen's power resided. As the lanterns of the Grey City flickered to life each night, casting their magical glow on the rain-slicked streets, the opera house stood as a beacon of both beauty and mystery. The White Queen ruled in her radiant splendor, her sister lurking in the shadows below, and all who entered the opera house knew they were stepping into a place where magic was alive, where every curtain, every hall, every rain-soaked street held the promise of adventure, danger, and power beyond imagining.